G'day guys, welcome back to the channel, and as you can see we've got a bit of a different setup here for finals, and make sure to let me know down below as well what you would like to see. Maybe there's a little bit of a background or something, just trying to figure it out, but I thought it'd be looking good for the podcast and that, so thought I'd set it up like this for videos as well. So make sure to let me know down below what you think about all this sort of setup and stuff. And also just wanted to quickly say before we get into the preview to the finals, just thanking everyone who joined us for the Boundary Riders Awards night live stream, which was on Friday. And if you did miss the stream, we're actually going to be putting a full edited video on the second channel, which you can actually check out right now. So I will link that down below. But of course, we are here today to preview the finals every single game, and we're going to be starting with Adelaide up against Collingwood. Of course, probably the big matchup of them all. Only played against each other a few weeks ago. A little bit of controversy came out of that game as well. But just looking on the teams themselves, Adelaide are probably the hottest team in the comp right now, compared to Collingwood, who are probably one of the worst teams in it, maybe just in front of the Gold Coast. Now, the Crows are in absolutely massive form. No denying that. They have been able to win their last 9 games and have beaten the likes of the Gold Coast, Hawthorn and Collingwood. Now, even though those 3 wins did come at the Adelaide Oval, it's not going to be such a massive issue. And the fact that their first final will be at home is not exactly a massive downside for the Adelaide Crows. Now, the Pies, on the other hand, have been really shaky. Since round 18, they've only been able to beat Richmond and Melbourne, while their losses have came against the Gold Coast, Fremantle, Brisbane, Hawthorn and Adelaide. So all finals teams that they've lost to, they have been unable to beat some of those top teams, which is probably a scary prospect coming into finals. Now, Adelaide should be able to see the return of Max Michelani, but the loss of Rankin to the suspension will be massive, and Rochelle is probably going to be out for another week. So it will be interesting to see if Adelaide will go with the likes of the young Taylor and Dowling to help up forward, or if they'll maybe look towards some more experienced bodies like Pedler and Murphy. Now, on Collingwood's point of view on the injury list, the massive out will be Jeremy Howe, who will miss at least a few weeks with a groin injury, so it means they'll have to go to the VFL to potentially pick out either Charlie Dean or Will Parker. Parker was a player who did go up against the Crows a few weeks ago, so it'll be interesting to see if they'll go with that again, but it's still such a massive out for the Pies, who have really struggled this year without Jeremy. Now, we'll get to a little bit of a final segment for the preview this year, and it's going to be called the Finals Focus. We're going to be taking a look at a player from each team of every single game who we need to keep an eye on for every matchup. So for the Crows, I'm looking at Ben Keays, and for Collingwood, it's Jordan De Goey. First, Ben Keays. Without the likes of Isaac Rankin and Josh Rochelle, this guy has an important role this final series. Kicked 3 goals in the game against North Melbourne in round 24, but he's going to have to be an X factor for the Crows if they're going to be able to go all the way. He needs to replicate the final series of Kalachi from 2024, in my opinion, and if he can, it'll go a long way for the Crows to potentially be able to get a drought-breaking premiership. While Jordan De Goey, on the other hand, has had a wretched run with injury throughout this year, but in round 24, we saw some of the best of him in that game against Melbourne, and he was probably the best player for Collingwood that night. And if the Pies are going to be able to knock off the Crows in their first final, he needs to have a massive performance if they're going to cause an upset, and will most likely have to hit the scoreboard as well. But to my tip in this game, and it is going to be the Crows by 5 points. These games are always pretty close, so I'm expecting the same here. However, with the Crows crowd right behind their team, I think Adelaide will get this one done. The Crows forward line just looks too strong for me, and especially without Jeremy Howe for Collingwood, I can't see a way where the Pies get this done and able to stop all the avenues to the Crows getting to goal. Now, my brother has put some players in focus as well. He has gone with Sam Berry for Adelaide and Josh Dacos for the Pies. So with Sam Berry, he says that he has done some tagging roles throughout the year. He expects him to go to Nick Dacos, who has played pretty well against them in more recent times, needs to stop his influence through the middle of the ground, and they win this game. But with Josh Dacos, he said, playing off halfback most of the year and playing some midfield minutes, I think they'll have to try something different if plan A fails with the likes of their midfield core. Maybe Josh Dacos needs to go through there. But his tip is Adelaide as well. He's gone for the Crows by 8 points. The Crows have been the best side all year. Midfield battle will be huge. The Crows just has to make a 50-50 in there. And with the Pies being pretty poor in defense over the last couple of months, he thinks the Crows forwards will be able to get it done, which I tend to agree with. Next up, we get to the second qualifying final. Cats up against Brisbane, of course, a replay of last year's prelim final. The Cats going into this one with probably one of the softest draws going into the finals, but has also given them a real positive being able to rest some players up, while the Lions have had one of the toughest fixtures throughout the entire year, and for them to finish third is a pretty massive achievement. Now, the Cats have won their last 5 games, however, none of them have came against the top 8 side, while the Lions have played 4 top 8 teams in the last 5 weeks. weeks, and the one outlier was the Sydney Swans, who have arguably been the best team in the competition outside of the top 8. So both teams having pretty contrasting runs into this final series, but with everything considered, the Lions have stood up pretty well against the teams that they've played against. But on a positive for Geelong, I have noticed in the last few weeks that even though they've still been a little bit prone to going to Jezza Cameron at times when he's not really been open, it hasn't been as bad as it was in recent weeks in round 24. They're still looking for the free option rather than just being Cameron focused like they were against Essendon and Port Adelaide a few weeks ago, which I think will definitely help them going into finals, because if they're too Cameron conscious, then they're going to struggle in this final series. And on Brisbane's point of view, with their defensive attributes, they probably have the perfect matchup for Jezza Cameron in Ryan Lester, who's done the job countless times with pretty good effect. And if that doesn't work, they have some great options, great plan Bs. If Jezza Cameron does get off the chain early, they've got Harris Andrews, even Brendan Starskovich I think could do that sort of role as well. So Brisbane have countless options down in defence if Jezza does get off the chain. Now on the injury list point of view, the Cats probably have one of the healthiest lists going into this final series, which is a massive plus for them. On Brisbane though, they should see the return of both Berry and Neil for the first final. However, they will be without Eric Hipwood, who is likely out for at least the semi-final, maybe the prelim. Obviously, he could play in the prelim final if they are able to beat the Cats this week. Now, on my finals focus, I'm going with Bailey Smith and Hugh McCluggage. Baz Smith, first of all, a few years ago, we absolutely saw him blow up a final series with his performances for the Dogs in 2021. Well and truly put him on the map. And after a terrific first season for the Cats, I think it's time for him to explode. I'm expecting a big final series from Baz Lanka, and I think that he's going to really shine for the Cats. And I think he'll have to if they're going to be able to win the flag Geelong. And on Brisbane, Hugh McCluggage is my guy to watch right now. I think this guy is incredibly underrated for such a long time, and I think he finally saw some recognition last week with his first All-Australian selection. I think this guy does all the right things and will become evident in the finals. As a footballer, he's one of the most honest players in the game, and I think Hugh is going to be in for a massive final series. But to my tip, and I'm going to actually be going with a little bit of an upset here, I'm picking the Lions by 8 points. Playing away from home doesn't have any sort of issues for the Brisbane Lions. In fact, it's probably been an advantage for them this whole year. They've actually done better away than they have at home, and they have a relatively good record against Geelong in recent times, winning their last 3 encounters against them. I think the hardened bodies of the Lions will just get over the top of the Cats in one of the all-time finals in my eyes. Now, my brother's players in focus are Shannon Neal for Geelong and Charlie Cameron for the Lions. He says, on Shannon Neal's point of view, played in last year's final series when Hawkins was out and needs to stand up if Geelong are going to go deep this year. No one player can carry a team in the finals, probably alluding to Jezza Cameron there, and he thinks that Shannon Neal, after a pretty disappointing first final series last year, needs to respond in 2025, which I agree with. And Charlie Cameron had a below par year, played a few good games towards the end of the season, but we know what happens when he turns it on, and if the Lions are going to be able to go deep, he's going to have a massive finals campaign. But to my brother's tip, he has also tipped the Brisbane Lions by 21 points. He thinks the Cats' draw has been way too soft, which he does believe does really help the Brisbane Lions. He says it could help the Cats with a lot of older players, but with the faster side of the Lions, he thinks they'll be able to catch them off guard. So both of us going with the Brisbane Lions in that game. Up next, we get to the first elimination final, Saturday afternoon, GWS up against Hawthorn. Both teams honestly could have made the top 4 if it wasn't for them dropping one game in the last few weeks of the season. GWS had a pretty tough couple of weeks coming into the finals, but they did perform relatively well, beating the Gold Coast and just getting over the line to the Saints. And after last year's straight sets exit, I don't think Adam Kingsley is going to let that happen once again and go out straight away. However, on Sam Mitchell's point of view, I think he'll really want to back up their performance after going out last year against Port Adelaide, even though they were pretty much the favourites in that game, despite being away from home. And the Hawks' form coming into the finals has been pretty solid. Yes, they did lose to the Lions in the final round, but they could have really won that game if it wasn't for a poor umpiring decision late against Carl Amon. And before that point, they did beat the Pies and the Ds. Now, the Giants could see a mass influx of players in this game, with the likes of Josh Kelly, Jesse Hogan, Jake Stringer, Jack Buckley, all potentially available for this game, and Stephen Coniglio is also a chance. While on Hawthorn's point of view, the biggest inclusion could be Josh Weddle. They will need his run coming into this final series if they are a chance of potentially causing an upset. Now, on my finals focus, I'm going with Toby Green for the Giants and Jai Newcomb for the Hawks. Toby Green, first of all, was poor in the the final series last year in both their losses and needs to lead from the front if the Giants are going to be able to go all the way. Like Kingsley, I don't think he would have liked the way they exited the finals last season, and he needs to lead from the front if his team is going to go to victory in this one. And on Hawthorn's point of view, I'm looking at John Newcomb. He's their leader in the middle of the ground and is a position in my eyes where the Hawks can get on top of the Giants. If Hawthorn want to persist with this tall forward line of 3 or 4 talls, I think they're going to have to get first hands on the ball, and considering John Newcomb is the extractor of that team, he's going to have a massive night for the Hawks to cause an upset. So to my tip, and I'm going with GWS. I think this game will be pretty close for 3 quarters, but after GWS got beaten relatively well in the last 2 final series in the second halves, I can't see them making that mistake again. I also think the Giants defense does have enough down there to quell the influence of all the Hawks forwards, so I think the Giants get this one done. But now moving to my brother's players in focus, he's gone with Aaron Cadman for GWS and James Sicily for the Hawks. First of all, on Cadman, he says he'll likely get the Josh Battle matchup if Jesse Hogan does play. He needs to put up a contest, let the Smalls go to work. After a breakout year for the kid, this is where his reputation will well and truly be made. And I can see a real big game from Aaron Cadman in this final series, so watch out for him. And on James Sicily, the captain needs to stand up when it matters. But had an up and down sort of year, pretty slow start to the season, was probably hampered by a bit of injury, but has returned since a couple of weeks off and has come back to some relatively good form. But that can quickly be erased, that good form, if he doesn't hold up in defense for the Hawks going into the finals. So massive final series for both these teams. Like I said at the start of this little preview to this game, both of these teams could have made the top 4 and could have had a second chance, but now they sit in really precarious position in a do or die clash. So it's going to be massive, that one. He has picked the Giants in this game. He says they should get a few back through injury. He doesn't trust the 3 or 4 tools in the Hawks forward line going into a finals game. Giants have too many match winners and he can't see Hawthorn containing them. But now to the last final of the first week. It is Freo up against the Gold Coast. Even though these teams didn't qualify for finals until the final games, their best could compete with anyone in the comp. Freo have been great to watch at their best this year, and it would be a fairy tale finish for the Dockers if they could get it done for Nat Fyfe and go all the way and win a flag. And honestly, I think Fremantle can do it. Out of any of the teams outside the top 4, I think Fremantle are my team that could go all the way from 6th spot. Now, Fremantle potentially could have made the top 4 if they didn't drop that game against the Lions a few weeks ago. So now they do sit in a bit of a tough spot going in a do or die clash against the Gold Coast. Now on the Suns, of course, they are playing in their first final series. This is massive for the club as it's been a long time coming. But honestly, if any team has just fallen into this final spot in 2025, I think it has to be the Gold Coast. However, they have qualified for it, so who knows what can happen. Now in terms of form, even though it only reads slightly different with the Suns losing 1 extra game over the Dockers in the last 5, I think Fremantle have played much better footy. Now looking on the injury point of view, Freo really have a lot of players in their reserves trying to vie for spots to potentially take over that 23rd position as the sub, but the only other injury concern on the Dockers point of view where they have to look at this final series is Hayden Young. He honestly could be the X factor that the Dockers need going into the final series, but is he fit enough? That's the question mark for mine. But relatively speaking, the Dockers are almost full strength, and looking at the Gold Coast, they could see the return of Will Graham this week, but other than that, they're relatively healthy as well, so both teams looking pretty good. Now going into the finals focus for mine, Fremantle is Caleb Sarong, and for the Gold Coast is Took Miller. For Sarong, throughout this season I have said countless times, if you tag Sarong, you can beat the Dockers. So I really think this guy is the most important player out of the entire finals series. And I will be interested to see if the Gold Coast have some plans to quell his influence, because they don't necessarily use a tagger. So I think Caleb Sarong's a big watch in this game. If the Dockers are going to go all the way from 6th spot, I believe this guy needs to have a massive campaign. But on Took Miller's point of view, he may not be the captain anymore, but I think his leadership will be pivotal in the Gold Coast potentially causing an upset here. He's going to have a massive night to get his team over the line, along with the likes of Noah Anderson and Matt Rao. But now to my tip, and I'm going with Fremantle by 30 points. Out of any teams making up the numbers in this final series, I think the Gold Coast are the real culprits here. I think they have struggled to play full quarter performances throughout really the second half of this season, and I really think Freo are the real deal. And am I a team to watch out of this final series? With the Dockers at home, I think they'll be able to get this done relatively comfortably. But now onto my brother's players of focus in this final series. He's gone with Shea Bolton for the Dockers and Bailey Humphrey for the Suns. On Shea Bolton, he says he needs to show why they picked him up. It just can't be Caleb Caleb Sarong and Brayshaw, with Shea Bolton be able to change a game in 5 minutes of footy. This will go a long way in the Dockers be able to make a charge in this finals campaign. He thinks that Bolton will be an integral part in the Dockers play this final series. And on Bailey Humphrey, back from a slight injury, but can play a role through the forward line as he's one of the best one-on-one young players in the game up forward as like that medium-sized player and can really help with Ben King if he's not able to take the contested mark. He also likes the idea of Bailey Humphrey going through the middle of the ground, which can be a real asset to the Gold Coast, especially with Rao and Anderson. If they're being able to be quelled, Humphrey can be a real asset through there. And if they want to make their first final series a memorable one, the Gold Coast, he thinks that Bailey Humphrey could be the guy to get this one done. But he has tipped the Freo Dockers by 44 points. Fremantle are just going to be too good defensively throughout the second half of the year, and he can't see the Suns playing 4 quarters against good sides. And with final series being all about being consistent, he can't see the Gold Coast getting this one done, unfortunately. But for now, let's get to our full tips for the first week of the finals. So my tips are the Crows to beat the Pies by 5 points, the Lions to beat the Cats by 8 points, the Giants to beat Hawthorn by 25, and the Dockers to beat the Suns by 30. And my brother's full tips for the first week of the finals are the Crows to beat the Pies by 8 points, the Lions to beat the Cats by 21 points, the Giants to beat the Hawks by 9, and the Dockers to beat the Gold Coast by 44 points. But finally, guys, I quickly wanted to announce the winners of the tipping competition for the channel and the Fantasy League, which you guys may not have seen at the moment. So the winner of the tipping league, who led throughout the entirety of the year almost, was Leviticus. He did end the year on 161 tips, so congratulations to him for the winners of both the leagues. Just message me on Instagram. I'll ask you a few questions just to prove that you are the winner, and then I'll give you the gift card for the win. So well done to you, Leviticus. And on the AFL fantasy point of view, the Cheetah Cubs Timber Ashworth is the winner. So make sure to message me, guys, to get your winnings, because congratulations. Throughout the entire year, you've been able to win throughout both the competitions, so well done to both of you. But finally, guys, just before we leave this video, we do have one more video essay coming out for the year. It is coming out tomorrow, so make sure to check that out. And if you want to check out other content on the channel, then you can click this video right here to check out a new video.